You like to live with that, do you? You like to live with that hatred, do you? That's your pleasure? Yes, it is. That's the pleasure that will lead you unto death. Oh, no, excuse me. That's the pleasure that is your death right now. Not knowing the consequences of doing something different with your hatred, not knowing the consequences of it, which would be, if you did the right thing, which would be the abolition of your hatred, not knowing that you could be different, because you can't know you're different until you are different, you refuse to give up, simply give up your violence, hatred being violence. Some of you, many of you, perhaps all of you could be physically violent here under the proper circumstances. Not knowing that the consequences of giving up your hatred can only be something very beautiful for you, very good for you, you refuse to do it. But you can't know it in advance. There's no way. Don't you dare ever predict what's going to happen to you as a result of you having an ounce of brains to say, in spite of what terrible thing that happens to me, I'm going to simply drop my violence, my inner violence. And I'm sure glad nobody knows how violent I can be. How I can hate the first 10 people I meet in the morning and not even see it, of course. My neighbor, for example, because all of a sudden that association went back to 2 years. That thing he did to me, that remark he made, that cutting remark, that remark that made me feel my inferiority. And of course, if you feel inferior, you are. And you're inferior because you want to be superior, right?
Right.
You want to win over your neighbor, right? You want to be superior. You want to make the cutting, rude remark. You have such a conscience. You're so decent that you want to be the one that makes the cruel remark that hurts him. That's your idea of being superior. You can hardly wait, gentlemen, can you, to rush into your house and tell your equally sick wife how you finally told him off. I finally told him off. You expect her to give you a medal for it. She'd be better by leaving you. She'd be better off getting out of that house and live with a nut like you. Because tomorrow he's going to do the same thing to you. He has no choice. He's going to be cruel to you. And you, dear lady, are so dumb as to enjoy the cruelty because you have been singled out as that marvelous woman who gets to be the sole, or at least the chief object of his cruelty. He pays attention to you. What kind of a mind do you have, either of you? Write down a sentence, please. 2 sentences. I am bold right now only because I have not as yet been knocked down. I am bold right now only because I have not as yet been knocked down. Second sentence, it will happen soon. I am bold right now because I have not as yet been knocked down. It will happen soon. There is such a thing as arrogant boldness, which is made up of all our combined accumulated sickness, all our experiences, all our bitterness, all our violence and hatred, which you admitted that you have. There's a certain false confidence which you, each one of you, had better begin to investigate very carefully in yourself, because it's much broader than you can imagine. Anyone can have what is called confidence when things are going pretty well with you, or when someone says something nice about you. When you have no particular challenge, that's easy to be fairly confident. Even confident in another person, which is very foolish, by the way. Or you can have the confidence of your hatred, the confidence of your anger, the confidence of your envy, the confidence, false confidence, generated perpetually by your general sickness. This false confidence is put up by you in 1,000 different ways, an attempt by you to get through your day with a minimum amount of damage to your self-structure. You go through the day from the moment you get up with all your weapons ready, your swords and your pistols, and your knives of words, of thoughts, of deeds, and also with your protective armor, your self-defense, your quick reply when someone says something that touches you in the wrong place, where you're hiding something, where you're lying. And we go through the day alternating between offensive action against what we call the enemy, which is everyone else. Everyone's the enemy, of course. And defensive action against people who might hurt what we've called ourselves. So this is the way we spend the whole day, and we get a certain false sense of security by keeping all these ideas about ourselves in place, a certain false security. And they work well as long as the law of accident, that is, things that happen to us, both internally and externally, as long as the law of accident happens to fall favorably toward us for a while. I go down to work and the boss says something nice about the way I handled something yesterday, and I feel pretty good. No need for defense or offense there. The cafeteria has my favorite lunch, and I've been looking forward to it for the last hour, since 11 o'clock, and they have it, and I feel pretty good. Nothing particularly bad has happened. And I've kept myself occupied with my work as best I can. I'm not even efficient at my work. Nobody knows about it, not even the boss, because he's equally inefficient, because sick people are always dreadfully inefficient. They can't keep their mind on one thing very long. Other things call away, and they follow what calls them. But after a while, the law of accident begins to turn against me. That is, certain things happen. I go out at lunch and I look over and there's somebody who's put a bump into my car fender. Or I suddenly feel disgusted with the fact that I have to work for a living. And I know certain people who are my age who are either retired or they don't have to go to the office at 8 o'clock, and so I feel resentful. And all this confidence I had over that nice lunch and the fact that the boss complimented me, all this false confidence suddenly collapses, and now I'm bitter and sad and generally worried. All because I've lived from a false level of being. Very, very low level of being, in which I don't really understand anything that happens to me. I don't understand anything because I'm so eager to get something out there, or to defend myself from something out there. I've made the horrible mistake today that I've made all my life of thinking if I can just get something, some reaction, some result from someone or something out there, then I'll be okay. But it never works that way. Maybe half the time it works that way, but even when I'm happy over the lunch and the compliment, I know very well that 2 o'clock has to come and 4 o'clock has to come. 5 o'clock has to come, and I have to go home to that home, which is supposed to be a nice, pleasant place for me, which is far from that. I see the bills piled up because I don't even have brains enough to handle my finances rightly, which is a part of my sickness. If any of you people have financial problems, you're sick because you don't even know how to spend your money properly, whether it's 5 cents or $50,000. And I go home to that supposedly happy home, and now all the hostility can come out against my wife or husband or against the children. And thank heaven for nighttime, 9 or 10 or 11, whatever, when I can black myself out for a few hours. I read a line one time, I never forgot it. It said that a prisoner in a penitentiary, prisoner's heaven is nighttime when he goes to sleep, and his hell is dawn when he wakes up. Any of you feel that way? Of course you do. All because you still don't understand yourself or life. The purpose of this class, for those of you who are new, is to begin to understand the mistake you're making and hoping that something or someone in that exterior world can give you a sense of constant security, which it can't. And that's the first thing you have to see. Nobody out there has a thing to give. Don't you understand? They're looking to you. Can you imagine anything more ridiculous than that? Your husband is looking toward the wife to be strong and vice versa. Two people leaning on each other, trying to prop each other up. Something very, very drastic is going to have to happen to you if you're ever going to escape the daily prison of hell that you now live in, which every one of you, without exception in this room and listening to this tape, lives in. It's a dull misery, isn't it, that you can't even define, that you can't even catch half the time. No, good news. We're here to help. Not the phony help that you get from society, but the help of just one thing, which you don't believe in, so it'd be very difficult for you to get any help. The help belongs to God, which you don't even know anything about. All you know is your ideas about God. All you know is the catchphrases that you repeat to yourself now and then when you get in trouble. Ask God to help you. You ignore him the rest of the time, of course. So all you know is a few phrases, a few words, but you don't know God at all. Therefore, you don't know how to make proper contact in order to get help. Help being the dissolution of you. That is the help you're given in this class. You're here, if you're here with an ounce of sincerity, to put an end to yourself. To put an end to this self that's got you into all this trouble, gives you all these worries, that makes you afraid of everything, makes you concerned with the future. You're here, listen to this please. You're here to put an end to the delusion that you have a permanent self at all. Where is it? Your name? What happens to your name when you die? Your business successes? What's going to happen to those when you die? Show me the permanent self that you have, which you can't do. Try to show it to me, I should say. And you'll be showing me your delusions. You'll be showing me your pictures of yourself, which you say, this is me. We've covered this before briefly in this class. When you're angry, you're that person, the angry person, right? When you're temporarily not angry, then you're the not angry person, right? When you're excited, then you're an excited person. When you're jealous, then you're a jealous person. When you're passive, you're a passive person. When active, you're an active person. Which one are you? You're 30 years old, you're 60 years old, you're male, you're female. What are you? You have no idea of who you are. Or rather, you know yourself being a different person every minute. But because you don't understand that your real nature does not exist in time, you think you have a permanent self that perpetuates itself, that continues itself, that reproduces itself second after second, minute after minute, hour after hour, year after year. And this is the self that you have clung to all your life up until this point, which has made you almost sick unto death. I have seen some of you in this room so terrified that I would vow you'd like to drop dead on the spot rather than endure that fear anymore. How many of you are afraid? Let's see. You see you're afraid? You're all afraid, aren't you? And you don't know what to do about it, do you? You've been trying to do something about it. I'll tell you very briefly what to do about it. Begin to understand that you have no permanent self that continues from 1 minute to the next. I have no permanent self that continues from 1 minute to the next. Then what does continue? The memory of 1 minute ago, the memory of a month ago, the memory of 5 years ago. And that memory is not only your false identity, but it's your prison cell, it's your hell, it's your torment. You can prove it right now. Think of something embarrassing that happened to you any time in the past. Anything. 10 years ago, yesterday. Embarrassing. You're still embarrassed by it? You're connected with time. Think of something vicious, cruel, whether you got found out or not, that you did in the past. Go ahead, think about it. It won't hurt you. In fact, it's good for you to do so as long as you're doing it deliberately and consciously. Remember that terrible thing you did to that man? To that woman? Remember that? See, this is the you that's still alive because you haven't cut yourself off from the time self by which you now presently identify yourself. Therefore, every time you activate memory and connect it with who you imagine you are, you suffer anew from it. When you understand that you do not reproduce yourself, you do not recreate in reality, you understand? When you rise above thought, ordinary memory, you understand that you do not recreate yourself every minute. While the memory of the past remains, there's no connection with it, therefore no false elation and no suffering. False elation being suffering, the same thing. Oh, I remember when I was married, it was so marvelous, some marvelous marriage, but it broke up. We broke up. We had a fight. You had a fight while you were married, or you would have had a fight later on. We're just on our best behavior at times, aren't we? And we like to think, oh, I was really nice at one time when I married that woman. I was really a nice young man at that time. You were a terrible young man, and she was a terrible young woman. And because you lived in this arrogance of being someone who was nice, and you were both going to conquer the world, weren't you? What happened? What you meant is that you wanted to loot the world, both of you, for your own pleasure. And you got looted, didn't you? You will now be very, very aware that any time you get your feelings hurt from now on, anytime you get arrogant, anytime you get sarcastic, anytime you sneer, anytime you get vicious, anytime you get into any of these negative states, it is because you are afraid. And this arrogance, this snapping remark toward the other person, which you in your cowardice and stupidity call bravery, I told him off. This is a sign of your inner slumber, your spiritual sleep. So from now on, when you catch yourself behaving badly, instead of condemning yourself for it, which is simply forming another memory to regret later on, instead of condemning yourself for it, you will simply understand that this anger, this bad act, whatever it may be, was simply a form of arrogance by which you tried to protect yourself and make yourself feel happy and secure. You tell me when you're cruel, which you are, you'd like to be crueler, but you can't get away with it. You get knocked down. Next time you're cruel, you tell me whether at the time of your cruelty, whether you think it or say it or do it, you tell me whether at the moment of your cruelty you feel secure or whether you feel insecure. And you will find, if you investigate it, that you are absolutely terrified. And your stupid cruelty is the only weapon you knew to draw out of your bag of weapons. And guess what? That sword you take to stab the other person is sharp at both ends. You pick it up. You can't pick it up without getting cut. It's sharp at both ends and both sides, both blades. Both sides of it are sharp. Your hand is bleeding when you stab that other man, when you say that vicious remark to that woman, because you know you can hurt her. And any of you women who hang around a cruel man, you're just as cruel as he is. You're just as dumb as he is. And I've seen instances right in this room. And someday I'll tell you about them. Meanwhile, go ahead and destroy yourself. I'm always a little, not surprised, not really, that you'll keep coming back to this class without having even learned the most elementary of lessons of what you're supposed to do. You cut yourself off from nutty people. Physically, if possible, sometimes it isn't. You cut yourself off from them for your sake, for your life's sake. They don't care about you. They care about using you. And watch what happens when you leave. Joan, would you read out loud that sign, please?
You insist on being in charge? Goodbye. You are now in charge. What are you going to do with it?
Do you understand that? Do you understand it? No, you don't understand it. No. All right, start with the most elementary lesson. You insist on being in charge. Have you ever lived with anyone who insisted on being in charge? Have you ever worked with someone who insisted on being in charge? Now look, on the level of ordinary work, if your boss knows more about carpentry than you do, then listen to him. We're not talking about on the level of ordinary knowledge. I'm talking about a psychological situation where you're involved with someone where this person wants to be the boss. Don't you understand that he can't be the boss unless you're the servant, his servant? If you cease to be his servant, can he still be the boss and in charge? Doesn't it take two? Then if you're involved with someone who's hurting you by insisting upon being the boss, how does he get that power except by your stupid cooperation and remaining in the psychological and perhaps physical position where he can impose his demands on you? So who's at fault if you're under the tyranny of any other human being? Whose fault is it? Now, you can say, either physically, it all depends on circumstances, and everyone, it will be a little bit different. You can say to this person, goodbye. Husband, dear husband, you vicious, cruel animal, goodbye. He'll crack up like a baby, won't he? Won't he? Don't you dare, wifey, get any pleasure out of that. That's not your aim. Anyone wants to be the boss, always let him be the boss. Let him be the boss. You have no need to be in charge. What do you need to be in charge of? You're in charge of yourself. That's your world. Go ahead. What do I care? You can't do anything for me or against me. And when he sees you mean it, or vice versa, it can work either way. When he or she sees that you mean it, goodbye, go ahead, be the boss. It's all yours. The house is yours. The world is yours. Take it. I don't want to take it. You'll see him stunned. Who's he going to be in charge over now? He had you for a while you were a dumb sucker. While you were gullible. Now he hasn't got you. Now he's scared. That husband is scared. That wife is scared. Don't you dare race to his rescue, to her rescue. Leave him alone. Leave her alone. Don't you go back when she starts bawling. She's just conning you with those tears. Don't you know that? Now, that's on the social level. You can say the same thing to your inner tyrants by not resisting them, by not fighting them, by not giving them life through your false life. They have false life, which your false life gives to them by arguing with them, by fighting with them. This means you will never argue with a bad habit again. You want to be the boss of me, you bad habit? Go ahead, I don't care. I am not going to fight you because I am you. I am the bad habit. Go ahead. I'm not going to be afraid of you anymore. You just go ahead and do anything you want with me. Watch what happens. You'll be able to launch out in a new really courageous direction in your life, which can be described for a long time. But one of them will be, you'll be able to endure the disgrace because you no longer have false ideas of what a lovely person you are. And you begin to be disgraced, first of all, in your own eyes, and then, if necessary, in the eyes of others. The more disgraced you get in your own eyes, and take it consciously, the stronger you get. And the freer you get of hypocrisy, of self-division, of self-torment. I'm looking at a room full of people and talking to many other people who want to be respectable. How many of you are really respectable inwardly, huh? You're not very respectable except outwardly. You smile politely when you come in here. Good evening. What do you really like inwardly? You're not very nice at all, are you? Can't you begin to endure consciously that you're not nice at all? That you'd claw at each other right in this room if you had a chance. And no one knew about it. And indeed, you do it mentally. Any of you ever thought hateful thoughts toward anyone else in this room? Mm-hmm. Huh? Mm-hmm. Of course you do. Our sickness always shouts at us to go out and fight. Go out and fight. And it can be, and it will give you advice on very cunning ways to fight. Do you understand that the suppression of yourself, the suppression of the way you feel, is a form of fighting? Of course it is, because it's a form of protecting yourself from people who might hurt you if you were aggressive. So you're just playing it calm and cool. The devil has 1,000 tricks in order to deceive you into continuing to play the game, to go along with the belief that you have, the false belief that you have a permanent self that renews itself day by day. All right, I want to end with this thought. It's more important than you can possibly imagine. Try to see that in reality, in God, you are indeed new every minute, because you're constantly changing. You're getting new thoughts, you're getting new feelings, you're in a new physical position for that matter. You're constantly changing every second. Thoughts come up and go away. Feelings come up and go away. And as long as you don't identify with them, as long as you don't look at them and say me to them, which you do now unconsciously, as long as you don't do that, even in a small way, you'll begin to understand how you, in your essence, you are really indeed new every second, so that you're not relying on memory to tell you how to behave every second. You're not living from memory at all, except on the practical level of building houses and baking cake. You have to refer to your memory for that. But you're not referring to memory to tell you how to behave, because when memory tells you how to behave, you'll behave wrongly and against yourself. When you don't know how to behave in any situation on the level of memory, on the level of the intellect, you will behave perfectly. You will behave perfectly, because there's no neurotic thought, no desire, no raging wish to interfere and say behave this way in order to either protect or promote yourself. There'll be no self-protection or self-promotion at all, because there'll be no one there to be promoted or protected. You have died consciously, and you have risen again to eternal life through understanding this very, 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 very deeply. In our usual vanity and state of spiritual sleep, we are quite sure that we're capable of simple logic. That is the last thing we're capable of. Even in our daily affairs, we can't think clearly, directly, and logically in order to handle some little situation at home without getting emotional about it or depending on someone else about it. To say nothing of our lack of logic in spiritual things, in inward things, and things that count most of all. For example, I'll give you a very simple logical statement. And when most people hear this, whether it's you or other people not here, people out at the bar and staying home watching television, even the simplest of logic will not penetrate, the logic of it will not penetrate, which is this. If I continue to think as I presently do, I will continue to suffer as I presently do. Isn't that simple? If I continue to think the way I've always thought, I'll continue to be in pain as I've always been in pain. Oh dear, that means I'm going to have to change myself? How dreadful. I'm in love with myself. Why should I change myself? I'm in love with every little misery I have. You're asking me to give those up? Go ahead, keep them if you want. We're trying to tell you that there's something better than misery, and it happens to be freedom from misery. When you present people with simple logic, reason of what they must do in order to change themselves, in order to not be a self-tormenting human being all day long, when you tell them that, they lose interest, because it means they're going to have to make the slightest little effort outside of their mechanical life. And this is the last thing that people want to do. Your friends, your relatives, and how about you? No one wants to exert themselves in order to catch themselves about to blow up and say, I see, that's how blowing up starts. It starts with visual contact. The man took my parking place. That's where it starts, the visual contact. He took my parking place. Secondly, it started, why did he take my parking place? It even has my name on it. That is my parking place. What right does he have to invade my world? Track the whole thing back and we'll see, as we said early in the earlier talk, that we get disturbed and upset all because we think that we have an identity inside that must at all costs be protected lest someone penetrate and destroy it. At all costs I must protect myself, because if I don't protect myself, and all these millions of people and the government and my friends and my relatives and my boss and the social system and finances, if I don't protect myself through my anger and defenses and little trickeries, if I don't defend myself, I will be killed by them. You are killed every day. And you suffer from being slain every day. But what is being slain is nothing more than a false idea that you have about yourself. And if you would have brains enough to let it be slain, to never let it rise up again, you would never be in pain, you would never be afraid of what the world can do to you, because it won't be able to do a thing to you. No matter what the world out there does, if you have found yourself, you are free from everything out there. So you see, the attack may be out there, but it's also in here too, through our wrong and misunderstanding reaction to what happens to us. I must protect myself. I must smile to you even when I don't feel like it. I must agree with you, because the last thing I want to do is incur your wrath. You might leave me. You might snap back at me. You might penetrate my sense of security and make me shake. You little coward, you're already shaking when you fawn. Don't you see how ridiculous self-protection is? The protection of this pseudo-self. You say, I must protect myself in order not to be afraid, and you say that while trembling. And you don't see the contradiction. Refuse to fight for yourself. Refuse 1,000 times a day to fight for yourself, till it gets through your head that there's no one there who needs protection at all. And when you see that, you'll be free. And there you go. There's simple logic in just 5 minutes worth of talk. Do you want it? Or are you going to walk out of this room as sick as you came into it? You could walk out with the beginning of real health. And then, that would be a marvelous thing to happen to you, because then you won't go out into the world trying to conquer it in the way you have been trying to do it up to this point, and getting hurt and knocked down and being afraid of people who have higher positions than you, who are older than you, who have titles. You won't be afraid. Listen, you won't be afraid of anyone anymore as you now are. You won't be in awe of anyone. You'll see through that man with the titles and the business suit, and who has a certain authority on the human level, which he may indeed have. He may have power to fine you or give you a ticket or fire you or hire you or whatever. He may indeed have that on the worldly level, but you won't be afraid of him because you're not living on that level. Then he can hire you or fire you, and it makes no difference to you. Look at the simple logic of it all. If you wish to become reasonable, logical, then these teachings will help you to do that. And when you are able to do that, you'll be able to get higher teachings, which will begin to change you, because you'll be getting your illogic, which is now you, out of the way. And something that is not you will begin to change you. You can't change yourself. You can't do a thing. All you can do is give up trying to do anything. Then the change will happen all by itself. And you'll have nothing to brag about, believe me. Because it's not you doing it at all. You want to say you changed that habit. You didn't even change that habit of smoking when you gave it up. You didn't give up that alcohol. You want to brag about it? Who's bragging? You want to keep yourself in place. So you don't drink or smoke, but you curse people, and you curse yourself, and you hate yourself. And you're afraid of the night. And you're afraid you may go insane. And you're bragging about the fact that you gave up smoking. You are free when there's no one to brag about.
Earlier you said there's good news. There is God. Proper contact consists of the dissolution of the self. I didn't get that.
All right.
Your terminology.
Yeah. You see, most of you, in spite of the repetition of a certain teaching, the teaching that you are presently made up of imaginary ideas about yourself, the only identity you have, you don't really understand it. You don't really see it. You're quite sure that you are who you imagine you are. You are not, but you don't see this. This is why it's quite necessary for me to repeat it many times in as many different ways as I can. And it's necessary for you to begin to try to understand it, so that you begin to understand that you must dissolve. The seed must fall into the ground and die, so that something that is not the seed can take its place. The seed being our hardened shell of our vanity, our conceit, our belief that we do have a permanent self, and a self that's apart from the all. That makes the self. As it begins to dissolve, let me rephrase that. This hardened self can't accept God with a capital G, because it has already made itself a God with a small g. You don't mean to tell me that I'm not a great man when I got elected to office and 10 million people voted for me and made me the congressman for their district, and I had this title in this office in Washington, and I pass all these bills and I send out reports of what marvelous things we're doing. You mean to tell me I'm not someone important? Look at the welfare bill alone that we passed that gave the poor people $1 million more a month than they did. May God save you from yourself. You have to get tired, to answer your question. You have to get so tired of the pain of being who you are that you're willing to listen to another voice that is not coming from your sickness. Were you as cheerful the earlier part of the day as you are now? Huh? Let's see the crabs of today. Let's see the suppressed crabs. You can't even express it. Let's see the happy, false personality people who go around beaming and loving everybody. Jim, you gotta stop loving everybody. All right, question. What would you say to a person who has come to this class for the first time? In brief, what particular advice would you give them? May I see a hand and a contribution from someone? Joan.
Set aside your usual thinking. Try not to make decisions against or for. Just listen with an open mind, and also decide that you'd like to come back several times to get a really good idea of what these classes are about.
Yes, that's very good. I saw Joe's hand, I think, next.
I was going to say, try to withhold any judgment that you have.
Yes, withhold judgment. Mm-hmm. So.
The purpose of the class is to teach us something that is not of our habitual responses.
Isn't that good? Yes.
Now we
Well, you didn't have to pat him for it.
I wonder where
Cue card.
What else would you say to a person who's come here for the first time? There's 1,000 things. Chuck.
If it sounds foreign, it is.
Yeah, okay. How about, listen, I'll give you a word. I'll give you 2 words. And then 2 different volunteers add the sentence to it. I can't tell you how important it is for you to remember this to tell new people, if you ever tell new people. The first word is hostility. Give us a sentence. Ralph?
Your first reaction will be towards the teachings probably hostile.
All the nice people who come here are hostile here? Well, of course. How about fear? Do you see how that connects? All right. But what is write this down. What is unconscious is always denied. What is unconscious is always denied. Then somebody give us a little better fear thought in connection with someone here coming for the first few times. What would you say to them about fearful reactions in the class? Zena, I think. Joan, I think.
Regarding fear, that you're going to hear some ideas that are going to, you're not going to agree with, and it's going to make you fearful.
All right, that's pretty good. Joan and then Duffy.
there are parts of us that are not at all interested in what this group has to offer. And in fact, they are very hostile to it and are fearful because they know that if the person continues coming here, that will be the end of the dark forces, the dark parts in each one of us. So they're the ones that are acting up. We think it's us, though.
We identify with them, yes. That's very good. Duffy?
Don't let that fearful reaction bluff you as it always did and keep you in your miserable state. Continue to come and bear the fear.
Right. Okay. All right. Who? Is that Dottie? Yes, Dottie.
Yeah, only the false is fearful.
What?
Only the false is fearful.
Say it again.
Only the false is fearful.
Yes, that is a good summary. That's what I'll hand over here. Tom, and then I'll...
That we come here to be exposed for what we are, not what we think we are.
Ah, excellent.
So we've all come here in fear of the unfamiliar.
Fear of the unfamiliar, yes. Do you know what one of the unfamiliars is? Freedom? Don't tell me about freedom. I'm happy in my chains. What'll I do if I can't cry?
I think most of us have come here with the feeling that there's got to be another way than the way we've been living all our life.
Yes. All right, that's fine. That's enough on that one. Now, I wish I could really tell you about what I'm going to tell you about, but we have to use words to communicate as best we can, to say certain fundamental truths in different ways, perhaps illustrating them, repeating them, so as to give you an opportunity to take the words and then make something higher out of them, which will be insight. So you'll be given words tonight about a very, very vital subject, an important subject, a topic which most human beings never come right down and wrestle with, because the very idea of wrestling with it and trying to overpower it through strength that is higher than their own, the very idea is too frightening. And that is the idea of security and its opposite of insecurity. Governments and churches and friends and football games have all promised, and banks have all promised human beings a sense of security, a feeling that you're okay, that everything is all right. They have failed utterly, and they always will fail, because they're trying to give you security where it doesn't exist. People with $1 million jump off bridges. People with a nice husband, nice wife, nice family cry themselves to sleep. People with everything you could want socially in the way of worldly goods. Maybe they have good health and they have their youth and they have everything, and still they're scared and insecure, and they shake all day and they shake all night. And then you have to cover it up. You have to cover it up by trying to convince yourself that you're pretty much solid. Look what I've got, you say to yourself, trying to convince yourself, and it never works. So society as a whole, religion, ordinary religion, governments, have no idea of how to approach the ideas of security and insecurity correctly. It is foreign to them. The nervous individual in the government or in the church or wherever, that nervous man is trying to teach another nervous man to be calm and composed and poised. He's telling him how we'll increase your pension and you'll feel better. He doesn't feel better. Nothing works. So we have to look at it from an entirely different viewpoint, which we'll do here tonight. And I will tell you that you will not understand what I'm going to say. You won't begin to understand it. But you can begin, so to speak, to try to see the depths of what we're talking about. And when that stage comes, when you understand thoroughly what we're talking about, you'll understand the following sentence. Please write down the following. There is perfect security, but not for me. There is perfect security, but not for me. Those of you who have been to this class for some time perhaps see what's involved in this. I can never be secure. You, in your present labels, your present ideas about yourself, can never be secure. There can be no security for me. There can be no security for you. But there can be security. Security in which you're not chasing after anything, which you don't want anything except the things that are right for physical continuance, spiritual things, of course. But there's a perfect security because there's no one there. There is no one there to be concerned with either his security or his insecurity. And if you find yourself involved verbally in either word, you will find yourself involved in its opposite. You say, I'm insecure today. Tomorrow I will be safe. Everything will be all right tomorrow when this or that happens, this or that straightens out. I get that financial settlement, or my children behave better, or whatever. Isn't it strange? Isn't it more than strange that we don't see that why we claim that someday we'll be secure, that the very saying of that is insecurity itself, is nervousness, is shakiness itself. I am doing an impossible task trying to feel secure. There's no way you can make an attempt to try to feel secure. Every attempt you make will be based on the delusion that you have a self all by yourself that belongs to you, that if you can just get that other person, that other man, that other woman to cooperate, if you can just get the government to pass that law, we've got to go out and big turnout, down at the city hall to get that law passed, then we'll feel better. We never see the fundamental mistake that we're making. Tonight, you had better begin to see it if you want to put an end to your shaking. All right, now I will state it as simply as I can. Every one of you, every one of us here in this room are being cared for perfectly. You are being cared for perfectly, but you don't know it because you can't know it. You are trying to feel secure, which means an illusion is trying to feel secure. Which means a ghost is trying to feel secure. But a ghost, being a scary thing, scares itself as much as the other person, to use a figure of speech. Can you see that if you can track down all these things we've talked about, all these ideas of identification, of self-reference, of trying to make the world revolve around me, etc., etc. If I could see through all these things, then there would be perfect safety, because I am not there to want either safety or to fear unsafety. In short, how marvelous to think that if I disappear, if I no longer have any self-reference at all, I am perfectly secure without thinking about it. As a matter of fact, the minute I think about it, my security, my safety, I feel in danger. I will guarantee you that throughout your whole day today, every one of you in this room and listening to this tape felt yourself in danger. You felt that something hazardous was around you or around the corner. Didn't it ever occur to you, by the way, to get off just a minute, didn't it ever occur to you to ask where this feeling of being threatened came from? Where did that threat come from? Not from that sick society that can certainly fire you and leave you without an income. Not from that. That sense of insecurity doesn't come from a God that you think have deserted you. No matter how often you pray, nothing seems to work out. And doesn't, by the way, doesn't occur to you that maybe there's something wrong with your praying instead of with God himself. Never occur to you to look inside yourself and see where your feeling of shakiness comes from? Comes from just one thing: you wanting to be secure. You better get this down. If you get nothing else down, every attempt to feel secure makes me insecure. Now, you're going to have to watch very carefully all day long what you're doing. You know that family you have? You know that family you have? That wife, that husband? You know that nice paycheck you have? That career that's beginning to get off the ground and fly a little bit? Those nice, exciting activities you have? All those things that you keep yourself doing all the time in order to keep yourself occupied so you won't have to face your emptiness? Don't you dare call yourself secure as long as you're trying to keep yourself occupied. You will begin to be secure, the very, very bare beginning of it, when you're aware that if something falls away from you, you will collapse and bawl and feel scared. And incidentally, feel helpless and rageful at whoever, you're not quite sure who's doing this to you, at who let you down and made you all alone. No one to tell you how nice you are, that everything is all right. Will you quit trying to convince yourself that things are all right? I wish I could convince you tonight how bad things are. how all wrong they are. If you could see that much, you would have taken a right step toward understanding what we're talking about tonight. Write down a sentence, please. To understand insecurity, never say I without also saying you. Never say I without also saying you. To understand insecurity, never say I without also saying you. May I see the hands of the self-centered people in the room who thinks the world revolves around your petty little affairs, and you tell other people about them, don't you? Can't you notice the boredom in their eyes? Do at least that much. They want to talk about themselves, you know. Okay, what did we just say? Never say I without also saying you. Now this is very profound, much more than you can imagine. If I say I, this is the only I want to exist in the world. Me, my world. Now don't you dare tell me, you won't succeed in convincing me, that you believe in the world of another person. You believe in your world exclusively. Now, if you even in one certain way think about the world of another person, it's because you first have created your illusory world, therefore you must create his illusory world, and guess what? That other person's illusory world becomes the enemy, becomes the rival, becomes the world that you must knock down and destroy in order to prove that your self-centered little world is the only one that exists or has a right to exist. I want that higher pension and you'd better give it to me or I'll act like an idiot in front of the government building for the next 6 weeks. Or I'll cause violence. Or whatever. The last thing that the I, your I, or my I, wants to do is to do what we just said. That is, it doesn't also want to say you. Do you understand what we're getting at in this, those of you who have been here for some time? You're trying to understand the following. You're trying to understand that I exist only on the level of a self-description, the level of the intellect. All right. So do you. If I can understand that the intellect always operates in opposites, I can never say I without unconsciously saying you. I have to say you because my I creates you. When I deliberately say you, I begin to break down the false belief in my separate, isolated and lonely self, and I look over and maybe, believe me, for the first time in my life, after I say I consciously and say you consciously, and I look at you, maybe I look at Chuck's face, I say I and I say you, Chuck, and it suddenly dawns on me, maybe for the first time, I thought I understood it all my life, I was a nice person and all. For the first time I understand there's a human being there who is just as suffering, as confused, as hurt, as helpless as I am. I really thought that I was the only person who had problems or had a right to problems or had a right to all the salvation from the problems wherever I was going to find it, and I didn't know where. But it suddenly occurs to me that there is in the physical flesh, another human being besides this one that I call my own little separate self, my own little God, calling myself God with a capital G. If I can begin just with this small start to see I and you, both consciously, after doing that for a long, long time, a marvelous revelation will come to me, which will begin to shatter my feeling of insecurity. I'm insecure because at the start I had to win over him or over her. I had to get something, even your approval, by laughing with you, smiling with you, trading with you, in order to confirm that my world is real and important. But because I still shook trying to do that, I'm going to do this exercise of saying you as well as me. Try to shatter this shell of selfness, break it down in order to be able to see that there is someone besides me on the face of this earth, see them psychologically, not just physically, because that is easy to do, but to see them psychologically as another human being, as other human beings. When I do this, hard work, the time will come when the revelation will come. First I thought just I existed, then I thought both of us existed, and then the great revelation that begins to make me feel authentically secure is to see that neither of us existed. Because I've seen that as I was building up my ideas about myself, my illusions about myself, that I'm good, bad, successful, a failure, no, as I begin to see that all these are mere self-descriptions I put on myself, and I'm beginning to see you as well as me, I begin to see that I build you the way I need you to be in order to keep me in place, what I've called me in place. So this is why sometimes this gentleman here, this lady here, sometimes you're very good for me to be an enemy. I need to hate you. If I hate him, here is a hater, right? I exist as a hater, and I justify it. I have a right to hate you. You stole my money. You didn't give me the raise, whatever. Or I may love you. Why do I say I love you on the level of verbalization? Why do I say I love you? Because I am confirmed as someone who's so nice that I'm a nice person. I must to love you. Am I not nice? Huh? Don't you want me? I'm nice. If you don't come around, I tell you I love you, dear lady, 10 times a day, I guess I get sickening after a while. If I keep telling you that I love you all the time, and you stop coming around, do I continue to love you? No. Now it's better to hate you, because I am no longer a nice, loving man, because you obviously, by your absence of tell me that I'm not, but you can't help me from forming the image of being a hateful man, and I have a right, after all I gave you, all I did for you. I have a right to hate you. All this work must sooner or later lead us to the point where we're quite sure, through insight, that we're living from a self which can never be secure, can never be safe, can never have cosmic courage, can never live rightly as long as we believe in its existence. Therefore, I'm going to have to disbelieve in its existence. Oh, what a battle. It's all right. What a battle you have on your hands now to come here every meeting, to go over this, see it from this viewpoint, from that viewpoint, seeing, as was brought out at the start of the meeting, the resistance and the hostility that the false self has, the artificial self has. Sensing, as Joan suggested, sensing its destruction at the hands of truth, seeing how cunning it is, how it can lie to you, how the devil can call himself an angel, coming back, attacking it, wrestling with it all day, not just here, all day long, until a light begins to dawn on all these things that we're talking about. And I'll give you one more clue to it if you'll write it down, please. All time thinking leads to insecurity, except in practical matters. All time thinking leads to insecurity, except in practical matters. All time thinking leads to insecurity, except in practical matters. It is time thinking if you say, I'll go shopping at 10 o'clock this morning. It's time thinking if you say, I'll water my lawn now instead of later. It's time thinking if you say, well, I'd better go down and pay that bill before they shut the water off. You obviously know what time thinking is, and we do live in it because we live in a time body. The physical body is a time body. It's born, it's young at one time, it grows older, and finally it disappears, it dies. The body lives in time. There is something in us that does not live in time, and we have to begin to see the difference in the two. In other words, there's a part of us that lives in eternity. The part that lives in eternity can never be insecure. It is secure because it is truth, God, the kingdom of heaven within itself. Therefore, it can't shake over anything. But time thinking, which refers back to what I think is myself, will always make me shake because it's a delusion that there's someone there at all. I, Juan, Joan, Chuck, Leland, all live in time. My ideas about myself live in time. When you die, when I die, and your brain ceases to exist as a separate brain, seeming to confirm you, when the brain ceases to operate, is it still going to create Vernon, Juan, Joan? Is there a brain there to recreate it and to form a center around you? Therefore, this is what we're afraid of. We're afraid that Vernon, Juan, will come to an end. But if you would come to an end now, while you're alive, through comprehending these things, if you would come to an end now, could there be any time thinking toward yourself? No, because the time self has disappeared through transcending it, through understanding its false existence in the first place. Therefore, do use time thinking to water the apple tree and take 45 minutes to get to work and things like that. But do not think in time toward yourself, take no thought for tomorrow, for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Do you remember we had a brief lesson a while back that there is no self that recreates itself, that reproduces itself from second to second. There's only the illusion of self because memory keeps saying I. 5 minutes ago I bought the steak at the market. 10 minutes from now I'll start cooking it. I. Everything is centered around me. Begin to understand that you create yourself, what you call yourself, the false self, on the level of repeated memory thoughts. When you understand that it is quite possible to put an end to repeated memory thoughts by slowing down thoughts and then not recreating them, you'll see that there never really and never was a self there to begin with, therefore none to protect. Sound like a little bit of work to you? Huh? All right, we'll give you some good news. You can do it. And look, even if you're afraid of the hard work, what has that got to do with it? Do it anyway. Even if you feel threatened, and you will, you're going to feel threatened. You're going to be afraid to go this far. How far do you want to go, ladies, gentlemen? Do you want to go to the point where you understand thoroughly everything we've talked about so that nothing can shake you? Nothing can shake you. Even the thought of your own death can't shake you, because that's merely a thought and refers back to nothingness. Who dies? Write something down, please. Ah, exclamation point. A-H, exclamation point. Ah, captured again, exclamation point. Ah, captured again. This is a long step out. This means you're closing the refrigerator door, or walking across the room, or picking up a pencil or whatever. And while you're doing this, it suddenly occurs to you that you were in a negative state of some kind, one of 10,000 varieties. How many had an argument, a mental argument with someone else today? Come on. Yesterday? Last year? We got you all. All right. Because you've been working long and hard and have learned what it means to interrupt your own life, your own daily life, interrupt your thought processes, throwing the log in front of the rushing emotional truck. All of a sudden, you break that, and you're not negative anymore because you simply remember the negative state you were in 3 seconds earlier. You had this imaginary argument with another person over something. And by the way, you had better notice your fear when you were having that argument with the other person. You were afraid, or you wouldn't be arguing with him mentally anyway. So you notice it, and you say, ah, captured again. That is self-awareness. That is self-knowledge. That's catching the devil red-handed. That is what weakens your shaky sense of security, or rather, that what begins to break your feelings of insecurity. Because you're always insecure when you are in your own life. Get yourself out of your own life. Write that down. Get yourself out of your own life. And for the first time, guess what? You'll have a life of your own. Do you mean to tell me you're living your own life now? How many imps took you over today, Alan? Chuck? Alicia? You can respond. Quite a few?
Yeah.
How many times were you taken over, any of you, today? That's your life? It's not your life at all. You're a slave, aren't you?
Right.
To envy, whatever. Nervousness. Ah, captured again is a step toward recovering your life. Which is your life because it's not your life at all. And you understand that, don't you? What you called your life was not your life at all. You've seen through it. But the main point being, please go through the day and try to catch yourself red-handed, engaging in these mental arguments with other people, criticizing, hating, telling people off. You like to tell people off, huh? Huh? Those dummies, huh? Just remember, captured again. You pay the price when you tell someone off. Someday it'll be so clear to you. The first time you do it might be the first one. It all depends on so many factors. Hey, I really understood and did what I heard in class 5 years ago about this business of captured again. Do it 10 times a day, 50 times a day, and it'll grow weaker and weaker and weaker. At first it grows more and more because you're catching it. You keep doing it a long time. Then it goes less and less and less because there's no devils there to capture quite as much. But don't go to imagination. It'll take a little more than 2 weeks. Joe.
I'd like to make a comment about stopping the rushing truck. Today I was working on a roof. I was working on an antenna, and I was having an argument with another person that I was working with, or trying to manipulate or compete. And all of a sudden I stopped and started looking around, and the mountains around and the valley and the dry lake over there, and it really felt good. Just, something stopped.
All right. You interrupted it a bit, at least. Okay, fine.
Struggling with one point will be struggling with all of them.
Say that again.
Struggling with one problem will be struggling with all of them.
Exactly. Because they have the same cause, don't they?
What you said about the I description and the you description, they're both just creations of my thought, aren't they?
Yes, except on the physical level and ordinary level, yes. I describe you as having a blue shirt. That's not imagination, that's observation. But I know that's not what you're talking about, of course. Of course it is. If I ascribe either goodness or badness to you, that's a delusion. You're not good or bad, you're nothing. You don't exist at all. If you have any goodness, it's sure not yours. Sarah, do you agree with that? You understand the point. Even your badness isn't your own. Do you get pleasure in being bad? Huh? You like to be bad? The Jesse James in us must go.
In other words, when I say I must also say you, because then I realize that I have preconceptions about you too.
Yes.
Very good.
Sure. I see a waving hand.
Yeah, this intellect works in opposites.
Yes.
Is that like negativity or?
All right. Think long and hard about that, but we can discuss it a little bit. If you have not only mentally but physically too, you can see it all around. But start with the physical and work to the mental, and you see it very clearly. Can there be a mountain without a valley? How can you have just a mountain without a valley beneath it? You can't have, can you? Can you have male without female? Huh? Isn't opposite? Can you have darkness without light? Can you have tall without short? See? Everything on the intellectual level, to confine it to that for now, has an opposite. Yes and no. Up and down. Yes and no. Let me add something. I don't think we've had this for some time. This does not apply. There are no opposites above the intellect. Above the intellect, which you can call God or cosmic consciousness, you have transcended the opposites. That is, you've transcended the ordinary mind. The opposites have their place, but not in seeking and living in God. See, God does not have an opposite. God does not fight the devil at all, contrary to what theologians and other dumb people say. God has nothing to fight for or against. He is the whole, the all. For purpose of illustration, you sometimes tell little children that God is stronger than the devil, which is, if the child could understand, you could say that God is stronger than the devil because God does not create the illusion of a devil. The devil himself is an illusion, but he becomes very, quote marks, valuable to people who want to remain worshipers of God. The devil is very valuable to sinners. You must get over your need of having the devil in your life. This means you're going to have to go. Guess who the devil is? Juan Corpus. Take such a simple thing. Maybe this will answer your question a little bit more. Take such a simple thing as where you're quite sure that you know what you want at 10 o'clock in the morning. How about 11? The opposite, 12, you're back to the original. At 1, a third choice. At 4, a fifth choice.
At 6, forget it.
Pardon?
At 6, forget it. Both of them.
I'm sorry?
At 6, forget everything.
Just forget everything?
Yeah. Start all over.
She's saying that in keeping with what you're talking about, 11 you want one thing, 12 the opposite. She says finally at 6 o'clock you forget the whole business.
Oh, I see. Correct.